This agreement is the result of an extensive negotiation to resolve a number of significant outstanding issues. Firstly, the devolution of policing and justice responsibilities. The agreement on policing and justice devolution builds on decisions which the Deputy First Minister and I had previously taken, notably our statement of November 2008, and on solid work by this Assembly, in particular by its Assembly and Executive Review Committee. The Assembly has already passed legislation which will facilitate the establishment of a Department of Justice and has set out the procedure for the appointment of a Justice Minister. The agreement reached last Friday now sets a timescale for the achievement of devolution. A process of community consultation will be undertaken over the next few weeks. On the 9th of March, the Deputy First Minister and I intend to table jointly a resolution requesting that a broad range of policing and justice responsibilities should cease to be reserved and should be devolved to this Assembly. It will be for the Secretary of State to lay an order in Council at Westminster to effect this. The Government will set out publicly a parliamentary schedule for taking forward the necessary transfer orders to implement devolution. The transfer of responsibilities should take effect on the 12th of April. From that day, this Assembly would have responsibility for the broad range of policing and justice powers which previously fell under Westminster control. The model for the new Department of Justice and the method of appointment of its Minister has already been the subject of extensive debate in this Assembly, consideration by the Assembly and Executive Review Committee. Last year, the Assembly passed a Department of Justice Bill which sets out clearly the method of appointment of the Minister. That method requires a cross-community vote in the Assembly to elect a Justice Minister, following a nomination by any member. In due course, that process will be initiated here in this chamber. Today, we met with party leaders to consider applications of interest for the new ministerial post. The purpose of the meeting was to allow us to identify the candidate who we believe is best able to command cross-community support when the election takes place. Given the stated position of the parties, it has not yet been possible to identify an appropriate candidate. A new Justice Minister will be elected on the floor of the Assembly when powers have been transferred on the 12th of April. The Hillsborough Agreement sets out two principles which will be essential for the operation of the devolved policing and justice responsibilities. The first of these is the independence of the judiciary, which underpins the rule of law in all modern democracies. In the agreement, we re-emphasise our commitment to that principle. Second, the agreement restates the Chief Constable's operational responsibility, free from partisan or political interest, for directing and controlling the police within a framework of policies and objectives set by the Policing Board and the Department of Justice. The agreement looks forward to the work of the future Department of Justice. It commits to the inclusion of the existing programme for government of a new addendum, which reflects the extended responsibilities which will devolve to the Assembly and to the Executive. The new Minister will draft the addendum to the programme for government and bring it to this Assembly for approval. It will set out a programme of work for the new department and will also demonstrate how that will mesh with the work of other executive departments. The agreement offers an indicative list of policies which might usefully be included in the addendum. This sets a challenging agenda for the new department, one which supports effective policing, avoids delay in the criminal justice process, aims to rehabilitate offenders and protects the interests of victims and witnesses. The agreement makes clear that the new Minister of Justice will be a full member of the Executive. He or she will have the same standing as other ministers in terms of attending and voting at the Executive. He or she will have operational responsibility for matters within the Department of Justice, which will be subject to his or her direction and control. From time to time, the Justice Minister will have to take quasi-judicial decisions. In line with best practice, we are agreed that these shall be made by the Justice Minister without recourse to the Executive. The agreement also enables the Minister to bring any proposals to the Executive on how the Ministerial Code and related procedural guidance might be amended to ensure effective decision-making in relation to urgent, confidential or other matters within his or her responsibilities, which might, under current arrangements, require executive consideration. Any amendment to the Ministerial Code will require executive and Assembly approval, and we expect to have any new agreed arrangements to be in place by the summer recess. In any event, cross-cutting issues, legislative proposals and financial allocations to the Justice Department would still require executive consideration. We believe that the arrangements in the agreement on the devolution of policing and justice represent an effective basis on which to move quickly to the assumption of these new responsibilities. It has also been recognised for some time that the successful implementation of devolved policing and justice responsibilities is dependent on an adequate level of resourcing. This was the motivation for our prolonged engagement last autumn with the Prime Minister to ensure that identifiable shortfalls in the current levels of funding were rectified. The outcomes of our negotiations with the Prime Minister were set out in his letter published on the 21st of October last year. The generosity of that offer was widely acknowledged, especially at a time of financial restraint. It has been repeated in full in the text of the agreement. The Prime Minister and Secretary of State repeatedly made it clear that the additional funds offered in that package were dependent on the successful devolution of policing and justice responsibilities. If the Assembly votes on a cross-community basis on the 9th of March to request devolution, and if the other essential steps are taken to achieve actual devolution on the 12th of April, then our policing and justice agencies will have access to that additional level of funding over the coming years. That will contribute considerably to the success of the new responsibilities which will devolve to the Assembly and Executive. Mr. Speaker, the effectiveness of the Executive in delivering positive outcomes for the community, and in particular how this could be improved, was an important theme of discussion at the talks. As we have indicated in the agreement, parties have put forward their own ideas, and we wish to continue and facilitate this work by establishing a working group to consider all proposals for arrangements which would improve the functioning of the Executive and its ability to deliver. As you will be aware, we have proposed that the leaders of the Ulster Unionist Party and the SDLP should co-chair this working party, and we will be discussing this further with them. Following that, we will seek the Executive's agreement to the establishment of a working group, which we hope can start its work by the end of this month. We hope to have Executive endorsement of this approach by the end of the week. Mr. Speaker, I commend this agreement to the Assembly and to the wider community.